Welcome to The Control Layer, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get to the heart of what's really shaping technology, security, and power in the age of artificial intelligence. I'm Amer Altaf. I've spent my career at the intersection of cybersecurity, AI, and enterprise technology. And I started this podcast because the conversations that matter most are happening behind closed doors, between the people who are actually building and defending the systems we all depend upon. Each episode, I sit down with one of these people, the leaders, the architects, the thinkers, and we have the kind of honest, in-depth conversation that you won't find anywhere else. No jargon for the sake of it, no spin, just real insight into the forces shaping our digital world. The Control Layer is brought to you by Arkava, sovereign AI and agentic automation for organizations that refuse to compromise on control. More on that later. So here's a question for you. When was the last time you bought something using AI? Last week? Yesterday? This morning? I know from my own self, I bought something last night. I was using AI to find a present for my wife's birthday, and it was very helpful. Although I probably shouldn't have said that on the podcast, thinking about it. But anyway, now imagine you didn't do any of that. Your AI assistant did it for you. It found the product, compared the prices, checked the reviews, and completed the purchase, all while you were having your morning cup of coffee. That world isn't science fiction. It's happening right now. And it raises a question that very few people are asking, but everyone should be. Who controls the agent? When an AI is shopping on your behalf, spending your money, handing over your data, who's making sure it's safe? Who's making sure it's even really you? My guest today is one of the very few people on Earth who can actually answer that question. Andrew Dunbar is the Chief Information Security Officer at Shopify. He spent 14 years building Shopify's security from the ground up, and he now oversees trust for millions of merchants, processing billions in commerce, including their expansion into agentic storefronts and their new universal commerce protocol, which we will discuss in today's episode. Andrew, it's a real pleasure to have you on the first episode of The Control Layer. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. So let's kick on, Andrew. So you joined Shopify in 2012, I think it was, as one of the early engineers. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been almost 14 years. I joined as the first member of the security team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to witness and be part of and help shape the growth of, not just our company, but, really the industry of online commerce, retail, omnichannel, all the different ways that commerce has evolved over that period of time have been things that I've had a front row seat in how we've done that as a platform, and Agentic and all of the kind of delightful shopping experiences that you just outlined are totally the types of things that we love to spend our time thinking about.
So you built the security function from the ground up. I mean, from those early days to I guess now securing over $400 billion in annual merchant transactions. What brought you to Shopify in those early days?
Yeah, so we were a company based in Ottawa, Canada, and that is also the capital of Canada. And so a lot of government happening there. And so I was doing cybersecurity for our foreign affairs department, involved a lot in incident response and in building up some of the engineering required for security infrastructure there. And I really just was looking for something new, and it wasn't very far up the street to go to the Shopify office. I got introduced and got to meet the team. And once I had the opportunity to join the company and see the types of things that we were working on, the scale of problem that we were bringing, but also, the mindset there was a deep understanding of security and trust from day zero before I even got there. I walked into a company that had a really strong understanding of how much trust is inherent in commerce, and that in order for us as a platform that powers entrepreneurship, we had to be worthy of that trust on a daily basis. And so I had the opportunity to join, to lay out a security program, led compliance. PCI was a relatively new thing at that point in time. And so understanding, how could we do that? How could we solve a challenge like PCI compliance on behalf of, at that point, thousands of merchants, which became millions, and really understand, how can a company that cares so deeply about commerce be set up for the best security trajectory? And the way that we did this was really through always every day, waking up and thinking, what is needed from a trust perspective in the way that commerce is going. Back in the early days, there was a lot of transition towards things like social selling, marketplace integrations. And one thing that we saw in Shopify was, our merchants, their job is to run their business. Their job is not to think about, how do I build an integration with, TikTok shopping, too, whether it was Twitter or Facebook, Pinterest, any of the marketplaces, any of the places that their customers were looking. We didn't want them to have to build all of that. We had the back end. We wanted them to focus on how could they build their business, merchandising, the design of their store. And, like I mentioned, the PCI, removal of credit card processing was a huge win for a lot of merchants. The world before things like Shopify was a merchant would need to run their own checkout where they're collecting their own credit card numbers. And over the past 14 years, we've seen an incredible shift in the security of that act, a lot due to a lot of the security investments that have been made in our industry through things like tokenization, the hardening of checkout controls. But at Shopify, we're really proud of the fact that none of our merchants have to think about PCI. It just is something we solve. Our checkout is compliant. We work with the PCI Council on making sure that everything we do is done in a secure way. And none of our merchants even see or interact with the credit card numbers of their buyers. And so, again, getting them back to focusing on the things that make them successful while we handle the rest and the technology is core to the way we think about all of that.
Did you have any idea it would turn into what it is today?
I would say what it turned into was not something we thought about. It was a lot more incremental. Every day we knew that if we had the best product, if we built the best service, if we could help the most merchants and build entrepreneurship, then the results would come. It's very hard to say whether we had, whether we could predict that or not. Certainly from the security perspective, regardless of what direction the company was going or the commerce was going, my role was to ensure that it was trustworthy. And so even from the early days, it was, let's make sure that, no merchant should say no to Shopify for anything to do with trust or security or data handling or privacy. All of those things have to be at an elite level in order for us to be the product that our merchants would reach for. And our goal is to just always be that.
So for our listeners who may not think about this every day, so when we talk about security in the context of online shopping, for example, what are we actually talking about? What's at stake? What is it that you're protecting?
So in terms of reach, so we estimate over 875 million people in a year buy something from a Shopify store. So that's about 1/6 of the people that have access to the internet in the world. And we are, like I mentioned, powering the back end, the checkout for all of that. And so our model is not a model where people, bring their own tech stack and we run it for them. We build software from the ground up all the way through to hosting the online store, processing the checkout, and all of those payments flow through our infrastructure. And so we do this in a way that is putting the merchant in front, which means people may not realize that they're even buying from someone that runs on Shopify's infrastructure. But what that really means is that our responsibility is to ensure that all of the millions of brands that trust Shopify are trusted themselves, because we are that nexus point where their customers are shopping, they're completing purchases, and all of the post-purchase experience. And so in order for our merchants to be trusted, we have to be trusted as well. And so one of the biggest things that impacts businesses, certainly is the threat of disruption, the threat of business operations being disrupted. Certainly, we've seen a number of cases of this happening where an online store gets compromised that can take offline an entire business potentially for days. And so, what we do at Shopify is try to ensure that, our platform reliability and trust and security are handled by default for all of the merchants that use us, and that everyone that reaches for Shopify when it comes to picking their commerce platform can benefit from that and not have to worry about the world of patching and everything else that can potentially have catastrophic impacts for them.
I mean, if you don't do what you do right, then a small business owner selling candles from their kitchen and their business, they can't sell things anymore. That would be disastrous for them, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the resiliency of our entire platform is a core competency that we believe in most strongly. Is everyone's store needs to be up, everyone needs to be able to sell and buy, and those transactions can never stop.
So we're moving from a world where I go online, browse a shop, and click buy to a world where my AI assistant does the shopping for me. So when you first saw this happening at Shopify as a CISO, what was your gut reaction as the person responsible for security?
Yeah. So my first reaction wasn't about the technology. The technology is not the risk. It was the human behavior. I think the idea that people are handing over access to sensitive information to an agent to act on their behalf is a totally novel thing in the world of computers. A lot of our security industry has been built around now a premise of your computer will tell you if something bad is about to happen. You'll get warnings. You'll see, everyone has been trained to look for HTTPS and, any of those things that are
The
the
padlock
user.
sign in the corner.
Exactly. The padlock sign, you'll get a prompt, you'll get a warning. And all of that was designed to, you know, bring humans along into the process of security on the internet. Once you start acting agentically, you're outside the context of the browser. A lot of that is not there anymore. And so I think it's an interesting shift, the fact that people are very willing to do that. But the thing that I think about is the opportunity for us. I think it's an incredible time for us to be thinking about a new paradigm for interactions between computers. We have the chance to ensure that authentication and trust are built in from the start, not bolted on later. And this is something that I'm very happy to be part of, is this generational transformation where, the way I think about it is a lot of security professionals are very happy that mobile operating systems exist and that most people operate on mobile. The reason why mobile operating systems are so great is they got to benefit from all of the learnings of desktop operating systems. The idea that, you can have a computer, you're running your operating system on a thing that was designed before the internet even really existed. That has been the nightmare of security teams for the entire time that they have been around. The idea of, needing to patch after the fact, the idea that containerization and all the things that you could have aren't built in by default. But as Android and iOS mobile operating systems got built, they could start from the position of, well, let's not do that. Let's learn from that. Let's see what we can do. Can we provide isolation by default? Can we provide security by default? Can we layer permissioning in? All of those kinds of things that weren't possible in the old world were now doable in the mobile world, and the benefits have been incredible. And so I really think for us, as we think about all ways of agentic interaction patterns, this is something that we need to really lean into the opportunity to do better. Is we have to support legacy protocols, but everything that we build from now on, we can take everything that we've learned, embed that into our protocol, and then ideally solve problems before they even happen in the world of agentic interactions.
So just from like a human level, did you immediately see this as a risk, and the warning signs flash and go, oh my God, why are we doing this? Or was it exciting to be part of something that potentially could be so transformative, good and bad?
So, I mean, in running a company, I also am thinking about how to secure all of our workers, everything that they're interacting with. And so for us, that's where a lot of our focus has been, is making sure that all of our employees can use AI to make themselves more effective, that we can do that in a way that's along a paved path, that we can do it where we have trust in the ways that our employees are working. And so the idea of extending that into our product felt pretty intuitive, because we've been super early and super progressive when it comes to AI adoption internally. And so this wasn't a foreign concept that we would now start shopping, or we would now start building this into our product. We were very early in trying to make our merchants discoverable. We launched the catalog, which is a global API that provides access for agents to all of the entire product base of our merchants. It's been almost a year that has been in operation. And so we've been along this journey of how to make sure that agents can work with our merchants. But the idea of, let's put this into a protocol, let's really put the stamp on how this should be done, is something that we've spent a lot of time working on recently, and we're really proud of where we got to.
Was it the 10th of January this year? I think you launched the Universal Commerce Protocol, or UCP for short.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sort of as an open standard, I think you co-developed with Google. So, in sort of plain English, what is UCP, and why should anyone who shops online really care about it?
Yeah, so the goal of UCP is to be one common language for agents and retailers, so that we are not dealing with every merchant and every AI agent builder needing to start from scratch in deciding how will we communicate when it comes to things like payments and commerce. We wanted to layer all of the things that we've learned from the space of commerce into a protocol, so that um, all of our merchants and everyone in the industry is prepared to do this from a position of trust. So we worked on top of another protocol, which is the agent payments protocol, as a way that had been well established for agents to provide the financial side of transaction processing, but realizing that, the diversity of needs that exist within commerce was something that needed a protocol in and of itself, is something that we thought was really important, and something that we were quite uniquely positioned to provide.
So, I mean, you co-developed this with Google as an open standard. What was that process like working with them, and also as a follow-up, why open rather than making it proprietary? Why not your commercial enterprise? Why not make money from it?
Yeah, so we've always been deep believers and benefited from the open internet. And so we always want to take the path that leads to more entrepreneurship. And so for us, this is something where the way to do that is not with a closed ecosystem. We need everyone that's solving the same types of problems to be pulling together, because this is such a fast moving space. The idea of this entire area didn't even exist 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And so every month and every week, we have to make sure that as an industry, we're taking the things that we learn and building it in a way that meets consumers where they are. Would be like the user trust and the buyer trust that goes into commerce is something that can sometimes be neglected. We don't want to be in a world where people are normalized to the idea of giving their credit card number to their AI agent and having it go buy things on their behalf. That could be a path that may exist, but it would be deeply insecure, and it would lead to problems both on the buyer side and on the merchant side. And so one of the core things that we did within this protocol was we really established the 4 different kind of personas that are required when it comes to making a transaction. So the first one is the platform. So the platform is the thing that the customer is interacting with. Usually this could be an agent, it could be a social selling site. This platform should not need access to the credit card number, the shipping information of its buyer. It is there to facilitate the transaction. It can act on the instructions of the buyer. But in an ideal world, in the same way as with PCI, we were able to scope out credit cards from traversing the internet and have them, be processed by businesses everywhere. We could take the same learning and apply that into the protocol. So understanding what the platform is capable of and what it needs is one. The other is the business. So the business needs to have the ability to declare its own rules. What does it allow? Like, what does it allow? How does it want to be interacted with? And our protocol creates a mesh of those things. So it's not, if you decide that you wanted your agent to go and buy something, the merchant may not actually allow that, or they may require some step up authentication, or they may have their own rules or their own agreements that they need you to see. And so it's the blending together of those responsibilities that were really important there. We then have the credential provider. And so this is really important from an international perspective. So just to put it into context, so more than half of Shopify's merchants are outside of North America. And so we really see a lot of diverse payment methods being used. And what has been a very helpful thing for the industry is the proliferation of wallets and the ability for people to have kind of a simplified interface to perform transactions. And so that is what our credential provider is entitled to do in this protocol. It is the thing that is understanding, what are your payment details, whether it's a local payment method, whether it's on a credit card rail, it should be adaptable to what exists in your local market. And it will have the ability to use tokenization as a way to safely generate your payment credentials. The fourth participant is the payment processor. And so when you can remove the flow of payments from the platform, from the business, have the credential provider be authenticated to then send data directly to the payment processor, it means that people's transactions will go through in a seamless way. But at the protocol layer, for us on a global level, this is something that it allows so much diversity and so many new flows to happen without an AI agent being, patterned to look at just the typical North American flow.
So it means, in particular, it's topical at the moment with payment processors, and particularly in Europe, looking at potentially launching independent payment processing aside from using Visa and MasterCard. So this open protocol allows for that kind of diversity of platforms as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and again, it's based a lot on trust primitives that have already been built. And so the idea of how you can authenticate might be, through an SMS, it might be through Face ID, it might be through, a credential, like a token. There can be lots of different ways that you may authenticate your payments. Agents shouldn't, you probably don't want agents to have to understand how to execute all of those things. You want to be able to delegate that to a protocol where it has, an ability to invoke the protocol, and the rest lies on top of the security foundation that already exists.
The control layer is a production of Arcava. When AI agents act on your behalf, Arcava makes sure they do it your way, safely, accountably, and under your control. Whether you're deploying agentic workflows, automating operations, or navigating the shift to AI-first systems, we're the consultancy that puts you in command. Visit arcava.ai. That's ARKAVA.ai. So you've spoken publicly before. I think you might have made a post on LinkedIn about running a homogeneous platform to reduce what you call N times N risks. But I guess UCP is by design an open heterogeneous protocol, so that any AI can call it. So what are the sort of the attack scenarios that most security teams aren't even thinking about yet regard this? And also, why heterogeneous versus what you talked about before, homogeneous?
Yeah. So one of the important developments that's happened in agentic interactions is the idea that every step of the protocol can have its own security and its own validation built in. So we don't need to just sit at the end of the process when the transaction has been completed, take the output of that, and then believe that all of the things that led to that were trusted. We are having, back and forth communications between agents, between services, which means that every step can have its own intent, be clarified explicitly, that there's a protocol negotiation as everything flows through. And so this means that it doesn't really matter how the implementation occurs. The spec and the protocol binds things to conform to the interaction pattern that is required. And so this does concurrently open up all of the diversity of different ways that this type of thing can be implemented, while making sure that there is a narrow waist, which is the protocol language for people to have to interact with. And so I think that, while it is from a builder's perspective, having a unified platform, having one way that a lot of things can be built and secured, it doesn't need to work like that as long as you have the protocol acting as that layer of governance. And that's how we think about that problem.
So does it's a common affect of using AI that AI can sometimes hallucinate, in particular interactions. So when negotiations are happening or there's a supply chain compromise, how does the protocol deal with those kind of threats?
Yeah, so this is where it comes back to the role of like the credential provider. So in order for payments to be authenticated, it requires the user to explicitly authorize that. And so that gets tied to a mandate, and then that mandate can be shared. So it's not, again, you're not just trusting at the end of the process that the process was followed. Every step along the way can have transparency over what mandate was authorized, kind of like what was the agent thinking at the time, or what did the buyer actually agree to at the time that they made that agreement. And all of those things can be verified. So the idea of a compromised agent is kind of cryptographically prevented because the credential provider needs to have its signed authorization. The payment processor is acting on that at the end. And whether or not the platform or the business have had any kind of security issue, the security lies between the provenance of understanding that this payment token and this mandate has been authorized by the user. We are now able to process it on the back end. And so it's that type of end-to-end transparency and accountability that is weaved into the protocol.
So I guess for organizations that haven't and aren't putting this in place to protect themselves in a world where AI agents are going to increasingly become the norm to facilitate commerce, can you sort of spell out the sort of the nightmare scenario? What does a sophisticated attack on an AI shopping agent look like?
I mean, it's a very early day to say. I think there are a number of techniques, though, that can really help. One of the things that helps a lot when it comes to ensuring that an agent, for example, is still aligning to its expected behavior is the use of evals as a way to look at what is this agent doing, and are the things that it is doing today aligned with the things that it was doing yesterday? And using that level of baselining as a way to understand, are we still seeing the same type of agent behavior? Are we still seeing the same types of tool calls? Are we still seeing the same kind of thought process? Those types of things need to be evaluated on a continuous basis. Another thing that I think is really helpful is thinking about, what could you be monitoring for? So shifting your monitoring position from just the more typical, we're monitoring on the server side, we can see this request has occurred. And by the virtue of the fact that the right authentication material has been presented, the right API key, the right session, we trust that it is the correct user on the other side and it is something that they intended to do. But with AI agents, you can actually go a step deeper than that. You can get more of a chain of thought logging, chain of thought attribution, where you can not just expect to see what is the outcome of the thing that was being done, but what was the agent thinking at the time when it did that thing.
What was
And
its
so the more
intent?
that, exactly. And so if you can understand that intent, that gives you a really good position to understand, are we looking at something that is intending to deceive the user? Are we looking at something that was intending to go off the rails and do something that was not expected to do? Or are we seeing the typical interaction patterns, right? And so I think the level of observability and the level of response that teams can have as they run infrastructure and they run agents and they observe agentic behavior, it requires a different kind of mindset shift of, you get to ask, what were you thinking when you did that? Which when you're dealing with people, you can't.
You can't do that, no. Oh, fantastic. So, I mean, in the research I got before this call, there was this H1415 event, bug bounty event that you guys ran in the early days. Are you going to do something similar when it comes to testing out for these kind of agentic attack surfaces?
Totally, yeah. We already have. So we have done an on-site event through HackerOne. So just for context, so we run a bug bounty program through HackerOne. it's been an incredible success for us. We've paid out over $8 million in bug bounty payouts in the 14 years, I guess, that we've been running the program since I started it. And we consider it as a really important component of our security program. And the agentic interaction patterns, our protocols, the products that we offer that are agentically delivered, all of those things are things that we really want to make sure we're getting the same kind of benefit from. So we did run a dedicated live hacking event where we brought a lot of the world's top researchers into our office. They got to meet with our team that's building these protocols and our agentic products, and then have at it for a few days to see what can they find, what is susceptible to attacks against AI. And this is an ongoing thing for us, is we really do encourage and reward people for taking the time to do security research as it relates to our platform. And the beauty of this is, everything that they find, our merchants are automatically patched against. This is not something where if there's a security finding, we need to send out a bulletin and people have to go and do something different. Our platform is an always on, always up to date, best version of the security of Shopify. And so whenever there are findings, they're remediated and the new versions are deployed seamlessly without anyone even noticing. And so it makes it that we can keep our platform highly secure and highly resilient to every type of adapting threat.
I think it's fantastic, the approach you've taken and are still taking with this. It's almost crowdsourcing, but also leveraging the power of the community to be able to protect the platform as well. So I think it bodes well for what you've put in place, but also the ethos of Shopify to not just ignore ignore the community, but actually embrace them into building out the platform.
Yeah, and I mean that's been a deep part of our culture ever since I arrived at the company. The first person that we got a report from, our reward was we bring them into the office and give them lunch and give them a T-shirt.
Hopefully, a good lunch.
We had great lunch back in the day, but yeah, it's evolved, but we've been super fortunate to be part of the bug bounty community, and we really do love the opportunity to engage with security researchers. The diversity of perspectives, the setups, the creativity of all of the individuals is way more effective than a lot of other attempts at finding security through more traditional means. And so for us, this has been foundational and super.
So there's a concept in cybersecurity, as I'm sure you're aware of, but the audience may not, called the blast radius. So when something goes wrong, how far does the damage spread? So with AI agents operating across multiple platforms simultaneously, I imagine the blast radius is enormous. So how do you think about that?
I think it comes back similarly to the fundamentals of how are you observing the actions that are happening. And I think a lot of things about agentic behavior lead it to having a lower blast radius. So a lot of compromises, the concept of dwell time is something that is prevalent in security breaches. If a device or a server in an infrastructure is compromised, an attacker could be sitting on that device for a long time, waiting for an opportunistic moment to execute an attack. With agentic interactions, a lot of them start from scratch every time they run. And so if something is not present in the skills or the memory of that agent, it won't carry forward from one session to another. And so I think this is another thing where we have the opportunity to kind of use observability, use security best practices as a way to understand what our agents are doing and how they're interacting, and not think from the same perspective of, there could be a way where if someone has access to a particular credential, they can go across an entire infrastructure. I think there's a lot more options for containment through observability. And, specifically within our protocol, the idea that every step and every interaction is cryptographically signed and is scoped to the particular entity that's being discussed should mean that the blast radius is actually lower in a lot of times in the agentic world.
So I want to ask something that I think a lot of people are wondering, but I guess nobody's really asking, which is how do you know whether an AI agent has been compromised? If someone tampers with my AI assistant so that it subtly changes its behavior. Um, Maybe it starts favoring certain products, or it's quietly skimming data. How would anyone notice?
So a lot of the ways that you can do this, again, come a little bit back to observability. So our protocols are designed for full traceability. So you don't just see the things that are happening, you get to see a little bit behind the scenes as to what was the agent thinking at the time when those things occurred. And the protocol being verbose and logging at a level that you can observe means that you can inspect the flow if that's something that you want to be able to do. And so but I think in general, when it comes to detecting agentic compromise, we have to fall back a little bit to the ways that we would detect if an employee or a device was compromised. And so the way that that's often done is through heuristic monitoring for seeing, are we seeing abnormally large numbers of API calls? Are we seeing external network connections? Are we seeing access to sensitive parts of the computer? And I think there's a lot that can be learned from the security models that have worked in the enterprise security space of being able to defend endpoints and detect potentially compromised user accounts, apply those same principles to an agent, and think of it from first principles about what would I like to know? What would I expect to see? And as you interact with your agent, build that audit trail and build that discoverability so that you do have the ability to see every step that's being performed and what was being thought about and why.
So do you think it requires a new kind of auditing behavior for AI agents, or is it repurposing, as you said, what we would have done anyway if it was a person?
I think so. The introduction of chain of thought and transparency around that is certainly something that I think isn't usually present or isn't present in the world of security of people. And so when you're dealing with non-deterministic systems, it is about looking at what context could be obtained at that point in time, recording that, being able to backtest against that, and use that as your way of building confidence that the right interactions are happening.
But how easy is that for a platform provider or a merchant to be able to do, as opposed to the AI assistant provider? Where does the responsibility shift to be the one who does that auditing and monitoring?
Yeah, so the protocol for agentic commerce is designed that all parties can do that level of inspection. And so for us, as the software provider on the merchant side, all of the protocol instructions and interactions that have been part of that transaction are visible to us and can then be audited as well.
Interesting. Okay. So you're overseeing security for, as I said at the top of the tail, millions of merchants and billions of transactions. So when you add AI agents into that equation, the attack surface, I guess, doesn't just grow, it changes shape. So how do you scale operational security for something that's fundamentally different from what came before?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always want to be waking up every day as smart as we can be and making the best decision every day about how to secure the platform. And so this is really one of the benefits of Shopify as a platform is that we see so much. We see, how attacks are potentially being attempted against our merchant base, how people are interacting on a regular basis, all of the different API calls and everything kind of being able to come in and out of our systems. And so this is something that we have built a very strong muscle of how to see attempted attacks, mitigate them, learn from the ways that we might find vulnerabilities or gaps in our detection mechanisms, and be able to do that in a way that all of the merchants on the platform can benefit from. And so I think the idea of doing this on an individual basis would be quite daunting. Being if you're running independent infrastructure, if you're trying to build your own agentic interaction service, I think there are so many things and so many ways that attackers may be able to go after you. But for us, we always want our merchants to be secure by default, and so this means that for us, we invest very heavily in understanding all of those types of attacks and being able to mitigate them. The benefits are, this leads to merchants having lower fraud exposure, fewer misconfigurations, less time spent on incident response, much higher assurance, and all of those things to us are foundational. And regardless of what type of threat it is, this is our approach to security.
So it was more of an extension to your existing architecture as opposed to rethinking your architecture for this agentic world?
Yeah, very much so. I think we want to ensure that our platform is open to all types of authentic commerce. And so whether it's in the early days of agents that are loading forms manually and taking credit card numbers and posting them in, our merchants need to be aware that that is happening. They need to understand potential fraud risk that comes along with that type of thing. And we can evolve based off of all of the signals that we see and all of the ways that we see the platform being used.
So, so I think you wrote on social media recently that trust became Shopify's biggest defense. But in terms of human trust, and not just sort of technical trust, so if I'm a customer and I find out that an AI agent bought something on my behalf from a merchant I've never heard of, using a protocol I don't even understand, that's a trust problem, isn't it? I mean, how do you build trust into a system that's inherently opaque?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and certainly something that I feel each person will arrive at their own level of trust and their own level of how much they want to delegate and how much they want autonomous commerce to be the thing for them. But I think conceptually, this is not that new. One of the most successful business types that we see on Shopify and that I've personally used is the idea of subscription boxes. So I had a service where every 3 months, as my kids were growing up, a subscription merchant would deliver a box of age-appropriate toys. I didn't know what they were going to be. I had just put trust in the idea that this brand would do the curation and would send things that were developmentally appropriate, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months along the typical journey of growth. And that trust was not placed in knowing what product was going to be bought. That trust was placed in knowing that brand and knowing the choices that that brand would make in order to bring me something that met my needs as a parent. And so I feel agents can certainly play that role. I think you could end up having a personal shopper where you've been given it instructions as to what your preferences are and what budget you want to operate within. And because of the level of observability and the need or your desire to potentially be in the loop for authorizing payments, you don't have to go in a fully agentic end-to-end, no touch happens and package appears at your door. If you want all the shopping, all the discovery to happen, you authorize a payment, that's totally fine. But I think this will be the type of thing that personal approaches will shift over time. But we really want to, again, make sure that people have the opportunity to be in control. And so certainly as these things are starting out, you will probably see a lot more where it is a person who's approving the transaction as it goes through. But as trust gets built in, as it has, with e-commerce in general, the more autonomy, the more trust that your agent has, every time it makes a good decision, your trust with your agent will probably increase. And so I think for consumers, we want to make sure that it's not an opaque system that they have to just blindly trust, that they have enough observability, discoverability, and control where they want to, so that they're able to go as far as they want with fully autonomous shopping, but it's not the only way.
So, I mean, I guess for the average Joe or Jane, the who may not go into the back end or try, look into the technical aspects, but feel comfort from there being rules and the idea that if people break rules, there'll be punishment.
Mhm.
So I guess, what role do you think regulation should play, either at a national or international level, in this space?
Like, we're talking about a protocol that has only existed for a few months on top of
Mm,
a technology that has only existed for a couple of years.
mm.
And so I think it's very early to say, how do we think this will shape out? Where do we see risks actually materialize? I think we're talking a lot about conceptual ideas that, things may end up following a particular path. But I think the payments industry and the online and all of the ways that people have been able to succeed in e-commerce can be a very strong foundation for how agentic interaction patterns exist. And so I think um, whether it's through consumer choice or whether it's through the card brands or transaction authorities, there could be lots of different ways that we could approach this. But I think in general, we have to see where people get to with this and what they want to have it do. And it's a very exciting and dynamic time to be in the space of developing in the world of commerce.
The financial industry is one of the most regulated everywhere in different fashions, alongside, I guess, pharmaceuticals and medicine for obvious reasons. But I think particularly when it comes to AI, we've seen different approaches in the EU where they've gone early with an EU AI Act and put real strict regulations in place without any clarity of how any company could beat them. And then in the UK and the US, I guess it's been a bit more of either a wait and see or let's hands off kind of approach. So do you think it's a better approach to engage with the agentic industry to understand what the capabilities are and then frame the regulation around that? Or do you think it should be actually the market is going to be able to handle this much better than any lawmaker and we should let them get on with it?
I think it's a very valid discussion to have, but I would say, a lot of the advancements in security didn't come because of regulatory requirement. Like I mentioned earlier, people becoming accustomed to seeing, the green padlock in the corner. I don't think a government said all websites must now be HTTPS. I think we got there through this becoming just the right thing for people to do, the right thing for platforms to do, a much more secure alternative. And at some point, governments may say that is required. But I do think as an industry, especially in security, where we understand the downside risks very well, having industry groups, having open protocols, having this type of open collaboration is a very good way for us to end up with the thing that benefits everyone, which is, a high trust way for commerce and other interactions to exist on the internet. And so I think for me, I would certainly rely a lot on that and setting the expectations high for brands and technology platforms to do things in a way that is trustworthy is usually, to me, the way to lead to a better outcome.
So let's lean into that a little bit. So we've been talking about commerce, transactions between retailers and merchants, etc., and where agents play in that space. But I guess the question of who controls the agent isn't just a shopping problem, is it? It's if AI agents are going to book my flights or manage my finances or negotiate contracts, the trust and identity architecture that you're building at Shopify might be a blueprint, I guess, for everything. Is that how you see it?
Totally. I think we've known for sure that identity and trust are essential to the commerce interaction patterns, but I would say certainly the same goes for every way that people are using agents to interact in their lives. And so things that we've learned around intent, around embedded verifications, around cryptographic signatures to ensure the right level of transparency, the right level of auditability, all of these types of things aren't limited to the e-commerce space. I think these are certainly concepts that any industry would benefit from. And this is another benefit of working in the open is that everyone can see, our protocol. They can see the way that we encourage merchants to work, and where it is appropriate for their industry. Certainly, this is the type of thing that we'd love to see, because similar, like the example of passkeys. This is something where again, it was a concept that existed, really took the device manufacturers, the browser builders, everyone had to come together to say, let's find a new way to do authentication. Now you'll see passkeys everywhere, whether you're filing your taxes or you're doing online banking or you're booking a flight, or everywhere that you interact. This became the best and most frictionless, highest security way for people to interact. And so I think things like that, where there's a protocol that's easy to build against, is the best way to move the entire industry forward.
So who else do you think needs to be in the room, for this type of conversation? And obviously you've, as Shopify, have worked with Google, but I guess you're two tech companies, commerce platform. But who else needs to be in the conversation in order to make it that blueprint for everything, do you think?
I mean, we work very much in the open, and for us, we've had many industry partners be part of the development of this protocol, but a lot of the other things that we do, we're part of a lot of browser standards. We work with the PCI Council directly on securing payments, and so we certainly welcome every interested party to have a voice in the conversation. And this is not a closed process. We have contribution guidelines, ways that people can gain access in our repository and see the types of things that we're building. And so we want to make a big tent approach to all of this and welcome all voices as to how we move this forward.
So if you could sit down with every CISO in the world for 5 minutes, and that'll be one heck of a big room, and say, here's what you need to be preparing for, what would you tell them?
So I think the most important threat that we need to deal with right now is AI-enabled attackers. I think we can talk about how we build protocols for agentic shopping, but every company is dealing with the fact that attackers now have easy access to deepfakes, to social engineering methodologies, to the ability to craft bespoke malware. And this is something that is prevalent across every company. And so for me, I would certainly say the most important thing that every CISO needs to do is ensure that you have phishing resistant MFA everywhere that you have any type of employee identity, because this is the type of thing that it is so easy for people to craft attacks to bypass, and there is no replacement for cryptographically secured authentication. So speaking from the perspective of, your employee gets a call, it sounds like it's your CEO talking to them and telling them that they need to install an app or give data somewhere or make a payment. All of these things are happening. And so ensuring that you've got the basics covered of the best in class authentication mechanism is the number one thing I would advise. Another, I think, is understand your landscape of AI. A lot of talk has gone into third-party risk in recent years, but really, when it comes to AI, you're not limited to just your own company's use of AI. You need to understand how are your vendors and your suppliers using it. So are they using it? How do they govern it? And make this part of your vendor security due diligence is understanding the ways in which AI has an influence over your products that you're depending on. And so whether that's fully agentic workflows, whether that's AI, through more LLM means, all of those types of things are really important to have a good understanding of the landscape and make sure that you understand how your vendors are using it. And then the last, I would say, it is this concept we kind of mentioned a little bit, but the idea of instrumenting decisions and not just infrastructure. So getting access to, a chain of thought, getting the ability to understand what LLMs are thinking, how did they come to make a particular API call, all the tool calls that they might be invoking. We've very traditionally operated at, the perimeter or in a zero trust way with a device, a user, and a perimeter, but really take a new mindset to how you could think about securing AI and go a little bit deeper into expectations of understanding their way of thinking, how they arrived at the thing that they're doing, and then use that as a way to inform how you think about your security.
So you've seen every evolution from early e-commerce to mobile to, I guess, social commerce to now agentic commerce. Are you optimistic when you look at where this is heading? I mean, does it excite you or does it terrify you?
It definitely excites me. I think so. As a company, Shopify exists for all types of entrepreneurs, and we want the newest entrepreneurs that are just starting their brands. We need the largest of enterprises to all be able to benefit from the world of commerce. And so for us, certainly the discoverability of niches, custom, gift ideas, like you mentioned, trying to shop, right? Like you're looking for something, you don't need to go to a big box retailer to just find the thing that you're maybe is a carbon copy of something else. You can really understand through an agentic interaction, what are some novel products that might be a really unique fit. The discovery of unique products, unique small businesses that are building for niches has never been easier. And so I think for us as a company that is powered by entrepreneurship, it's an incredible opportunity to see how much can be unlocked through agentic product discovery and shopping that merchants would have needed to either bid for ads or discovery, or the ways for people to grow a small business before no longer need to be limitations on how they do it now. And so I think we're really going to be, and we already are, living in a world where agentic shopping is a significant driver. We've seen a 15x increase year over year in agentic shopping, leading to purchases on Shopify. And this is the way that people are shopping. I know certainly for me, I start every product search with a conversation as to, who am I buying for? Am I buying for myself? What do I like? And all of these kind of things. So I think the opportunity is huge, especially in the long tail. And I really am excited about the idea that we can have all brands represented in this type of unified platform. And so there will be certainly security challenges. There's protocols and things we have to sort out on the implementation side, but I am certainly very optimistic that we can reach the future where agentic shopping and agentic trust are built into the fabric of our society.
So, final question, Andrew. It's been an insightful and in-depth conversation. If someone listening wants to go even deeper on how Shopify is thinking about agentic commerce security or even security in general, where should they start?
So we have our engineering blog is a really good place to start. We've done a lot of good content there. So shopify.engineering. We also, one of the great things about Shopify is we're an open platform for everyone, including app developers. And so we have a feature where if you want to build an app, you just sign up and start doing it. You can build that against our agentic catalog. So the idea of agentic commerce and agentic product discovery doesn't have to be some foreign concept. You could literally do that today of just, sign up, get a developer account, access the protocol, use the catalog, and really try it out for yourself. Because I find with AI, there doesn't need to be any friction to the idea of getting started. It's just, how do I get AI to help me do the thing that I'm trying to do? And so for me, my mantra is always just, if you don't know how to do it, ask AI how to do it, but just do it, because the AI, the world that we live in and the barrier to entry has never been lower. And so I think it's something where you can amaze yourself with an hour of guided development. And I'm very optimistic that people can live in this world and experience it firsthand. And then the more that people become fluent with it, the better the conversations are and the more that we can move the industry forward.
Andrew, thank you. That was a brilliant conversation. And I think anyone listening will walk away thinking about this differently. So I really appreciate your time.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for having me. I loved it.
Fantastic. That's it for this episode of The Control Layer. If what you've heard today made you think, and I hope it did, do me a favor. Share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. And leave us a review if you can. It makes an enormous difference. You can also read the full show notes, transcript, and my written analysis of today's topic on The Control Layer on Substack. That's thecontrollayer.arcava.ai. The Control Layer is produced by Arcava, Sovereign AI and Agentic Automation for the organizations that refuse to compromise. Visit arcava.ai to learn more. I'm Amer Altaf. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.